Don't be clingy. That's what she said. Just those 3 words, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Jessica turned her face away from my kiss like it was smoke in her eyes, grabbed her pillow, and walked right out of the bedroom. No yelling. No argument. Just a quiet, cold dismissal like I was a stranger asking for too much. I sat there for a minute, blinking at the empty space where she used to be, where her warmth used to live beside me every night. I heard the creak of the couch as she settled into it, and then nothing. Not a word. Not even a good night. My name is Mark. I'm 42 years old. I live in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and until recently, I thought I was in a happy marriage. That moment, the one with the pillow and the couch, wasn't the beginning of our problems. Not really. Looking back, I could see all the smaller things that led up to it. The way she'd flinch a little when I put my arm around her in public. The way her phone always seemed more interesting than my stories after work. The way our dinners had turned into silences and sighs instead of conversations. But this time was different. It felt like she had finally stopped pretending. I lay there in our bed, under the comforter we picked out together 5 years ago, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. The same one we used to watch together on lazy Sunday mornings, her head on my chest, our legs tangled. It used to mean something. Everything used to mean something. Now all I could feel was the cold spot where she used to sleep. Don't be clingy. That was the phrase that stuck. Like I was some needy teenager begging for affection instead of a husband trying to kiss his wife goodnight. That word, clingy, kept echoing in my head like an insult I hadn't earned. I wanted to believe it was just a bad night, a bad mood. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. This had been coming. A slow fade stretched out over the last couple years. Less laughter, fewer touches, more walls. This wasn't a crack anymore. It was a split. And for the first time in a long time, I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and an empty side of the bed. No pillow. No impression where she'd laid her head. Just a smooth, untouched sheet like she'd never been there at all. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, trying to ignore the dull weight that had settled in my chest overnight. It felt like a hangover, but worse, like I'd drunk too much silence instead of whiskey. I walked into the kitchen, still half in a daze, and started making breakfast. Habit mostly. I cracked 4 eggs, sliced up some toast, and set the coffee pot to brew. I used to make breakfast for both of us every Saturday. It was something I enjoyed, something that used to make her smile. When Jessica walked in, she didn't look surprised to see me cooking. She didn't say good morning, just walked over to the coffee pot and poured herself a mug like we hadn't shared a bed for 10 years. Then she looked over her shoulder and said, flat as ever, "You didn't make me any?" I didn't answer right away. I just kept scrambling the eggs, staring down at the pan like it could save me from the moment. The truth was, I hadn't even thought about making her any. Not out of spite, but because it didn't feel like she wanted me to anymore. She waited a beat. When I didn't say anything, she let out a little breath and sat down at the table, sipping her coffee with one leg crossed over the other, eyes glued to her phone. The silence between us wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was hollow, like an abandoned house with the lights still on. I slid my plate onto the counter and ate standing up, my back to her. I could feel her there, just a few feet away, but it might as well have been a mile. There were 100 things I wanted to say. Ask her why she pulled away last night. Ask her if this was really how it was going to be now. Ask her if she still wanted this, us. But I didn't say any of it, because I already knew the answer. Or maybe I just didn't want to hear it out loud. So I ate in silence, and she scrolled in silence, and the distance between us grew just a little more. And I let it. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep reaching for someone who didn't want to be touched. The word clingy stayed with me like something stuck in my teeth. No matter what I was doing, shaving, folding laundry, driving to work, it hovered in the back of my mind. That, and the way she looked at me when she said it. Not angry, not sad, just tired, like I was a chore she didn't want to do anymore. It was Sunday afternoon when Jessica walked out the front door without saying where she was going. She didn't ask if I needed anything, didn't say when she'd be back, just grabbed her purse and keys and left. I didn't follow her. I didn't ask. Instead, I went out to the garage. There was an old motorcycle in the corner that I hadn't touched in over 3 years. A '79 Honda CB 750 I kept telling myself I'd get around to fixing. Every time I opened the garage, it sat there like a reminder of all the things I never made time for. That day, I finally did. I pulled off the tarp and brushed off the dust. The tires were flat. The seat was cracked. The engine looked like it hadn't turned over since the Obama administration. But it was mine. And it was quiet out there, in a way that didn't feel lonely. I spent the whole afternoon on it, and then the next. Something about sanding the rust and wiping grease on my jeans made me feel more human than I had in a long time. By Wednesday, I realized I hadn't asked Jessica a single question all week. I used to ask where she was going, if she needed gas money, if she'd eaten, but I didn't anymore. And she didn't offer anything either. That night, she came home just after 8, carrying takeout and talking on her phone. She walked past the garage without even looking in. I watched her through the window as she kicked off her shoes and disappeared down the hallway. She didn't ask where I'd been, so I stopped telling her. Something had shifted. We weren't fighting. We weren't even talking. Just moving around each other like two people renting the same space. No love. No effort. Just routine. The next morning, I got up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and went right back to the garage. I found an old radio on the shelf, dusted it off, and turned it to the classic rock station. The Stones were playing. You can't always get what you want. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't making some big dramatic exit. I was just stepping away, not out of anger, but because it hurt less than waiting for her to reach for me. And for the first time in a long while, I did something for myself. I had no idea where it was all headed, but I knew this much. If she didn't care enough to come find me, I wasn't going to beg her to look. The garage became my home before I even realized it. Not in the literal sense. My bed was still inside, and I still showered, ate, existed like a roommate in the house. But emotionally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it, the garage was where I felt real again. I started spending hours on the bike. Getting the engine to turn over took more time than I'd planned, but that was fine. It gave me a reason to stay out there longer. The quiet hum of tools, the smell of oil and metal, it felt honest. Unlike the awkward silences inside the house. I cleaned off an old workbench and lined up my tools. Bought new parts online. Picked up a few manuals. When I hit a wall on the rebuild, I stopped by a local repair shop just to ask a few questions. That's where I met Ben. He was standing behind the counter, mid-laugh with another guy when I walked in. Looked up and said, "You working on something or just bored like the rest of us?" I told him about the bike. About how I hadn't touched it in years, but figured now was the time. He nodded, like he knew exactly what I meant. Before I left, he handed me a card with his number on it and said, "We get together on weekends sometimes. Rides, meetups, junk talk. You should swing by." I pocketed the card and didn't think much of it. But that Saturday, when Jessica was off somewhere again and the house felt even emptier than usual, I drove out to the address on the card. It was nothing fancy. A couple dozen guys in a lot behind an old warehouse, talking shop, checking out each other's projects. I parked at the edge and walked up slow, unsure if I belonged. Turned out, I did. They didn't care what I did for a living. Didn't ask about my marriage. Didn't look at me like I was broken. They just wanted to talk about engines, paint jobs, modifications. We swapped stories, tools, even a few beers. It was the first time in a long while I laughed without faking it. When I got home that night, Jessica was already asleep. I passed her on the way to the bathroom. Her phone was on the nightstand, buzzing with some text. I didn't look. I just went out back, into the garage, and sat on the stool beside the bike. And for once, I didn't feel alone. I felt free. The meetup that weekend ran late. I wasn't planning to stay that long, but time just kind of slipped. One minute we were comparing exhaust mods, and the next it was past 10. Someone passed around a cooler of beers, and Ben brought out a Bluetooth speaker blasting Springsteen. It felt like something I hadn't had in years, maybe ever. No one asked me where I was going next or what my wife thought about all this. They didn't know me like that, and I didn't offer. I was just Mark, the guy with the old CB750 he was trying to bring back to life. I didn't check my phone once until I got back in the truck. There were 2 missed calls from Jessica, both about an hour apart, and a simple text. "Where are you?" I stared at the screen for a second, then slid it back into my pocket without responding. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, and she was waiting by the front door. Arms crossed, hair tied back, her face unreadable in that way she'd perfected over the years. As soon as I stepped out of the truck, she said, "Where have you been?" There was no concern in her voice. No softness. Just an edge, like she was trying to reclaim a role she'd given up a long time ago. I didn't rush. I didn't explain. I just grabbed the box of spark plugs from the passenger seat and walked past her, heading toward the garage. "Seriously?" she snapped. "You just disappear for hours and act like it's no big deal?" I turned halfway, my hand already on the door. I needed space. Space. Her voice cracked, a mix of disbelief and offense. "You don't even tell me where you're going anymore." I shrugged. "You don't tell me much either." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out right away. And in that pause, I saw it, realization. That something had shifted. That the man who used to trail behind her with open arms had stopped waiting. "You're shutting me out," she said finally. "No," I replied, calm as ever. "You shut me out a long time ago. I'm just catching up." She stepped forward like she wanted to argue, but I didn't wait for the rest. I turned the knob and walked into the garage, pulling the door shut behind me. The click of the lock wasn't loud, but it felt final. I sat back down at my workbench, the smell of oil still lingering in the air, and opened the box. She stood on the other side of the door for a while. I could hear her breathing, maybe waiting for me to come back out, maybe waiting for me to say something. But I didn't. I had nothing left to explain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the man in control of his own life. The following week played out like a bad sitcom rerun. Same house, same silences, same shadow of a marriage walking around in Jessica's skin. She tried, I'll give her that, just not in any way that actually meant something. First it was her perfume, the one I used to compliment all the time when we were dating. She put it on before bed one night, like it was some kind of olive branch sprayed behind her ears. Smells familiar, she said casually, standing in the doorway in a tank top and pajama shorts. I nodded. Yeah, I remember. She lingered there for a second, expecting something. A comment. An invitation. I didn't give her either. Just went back to sanding the bike side panel with fine grit, focused on something that felt real in my hands. The next night, she brushed past me in the kitchen. No words, just a soft touch down my arm, something she hadn't done in months. I barely looked up from my coffee. By Thursday, she pulled out the big move. I came home from the shop and smelled dinner. Actual dinner. Not microwave leftovers or takeout boxes. Real food. She was in the kitchen wearing that dress she used to save for anniversaries. Candles lit. Music playing low in the background. The table was set for two. Figured we could have a night in, she said, smiling too brightly. Just us. I stood there for a moment. My hands still stained with grease under the fingernails. My boots leaving faint prints on the tile. I wanted to feel something. Nostalgia. Guilt. Warmth. Anything. But all I felt was tired. I walked over to the table, glanced at the wine glasses, the perfectly plated meal, grilled chicken, roasted potatoes, the salad she always made with lemon vinaigrette. This looks nice, I said. She smiled, relieved. I thought you might like it. I nodded. But I'm not hungry. Her smile dropped like a glass hitting the floor. I didn't say it to hurt her. It was just the truth. I already ate at the shop, I added. Ben brought sandwiches. She sat down slowly, staring at the candles. You used to look forward to dinner with me. I used to look forward to a lot of things. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse her of anything. There was no argument. No dramatic walkout. Just the sound of a chair creaking as I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. That night, I didn't go to the garage. I didn't go out. I just laid in bed on my side, staring at the wall while Jessica sat alone in the dining room. And that's when it hit me. Whatever she was trying to bring back, it wasn't for me. It was for her. A performance to soothe her guilt, not rebuild our marriage. I didn't feel cold. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. It was a Thursday night when she came to the garage. I was adjusting the carburetor, hands deep in the guts of the bike, the smell of fuel thick in the air. The radio played quietly in the background, Tom Petty this time. The garage door was cracked open just enough to let in the evening air, and for once, I felt calm, focused, like I belonged in my own life again. Then I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't turn right away, just kept working, assuming she needed something. But she didn't say anything. Not until I finally looked up and saw her standing there. No makeup, no earrings, just an oversized hoodie and bare feet. Her arms were folded tight across her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. I straightened up slowly. You okay? She nodded, then shook her head. Her lips parted, but the words caught. I wiped my hands on a rag. Jess. She took a breath. Shaky, almost like she was bracing for impact. I slept with someone, she said. The words dropped into the room like a hammer. No build-up, no tears, just straight-up truth. I stood there, rag still in my hands, waiting for the part where my stomach twisted or my heart pounded out of my chest. But nothing happened. I just looked at her, and I felt nothing. She blinked, expecting a reaction. I didn't mean for it to happen, she added quickly. It wasn't serious. It was a mistake, and I regret it, but I needed to tell you. I thought you should know. I nodded. Not slow, not dramatic, just a small, quiet nod. She stepped forward, like she thought this might be the moment everything cracked open. Like maybe I'd fall apart or scream or throw something. But I didn't. It's fine, I said, turning back to the bench. Her voice cracked. Fine. You don't owe me anything anymore, I said calmly. I think we both knew this ended a while ago. She stared at me like she couldn't decide whether to cry or scream. Mark, I raised a hand, not in anger, just to stop her. It's okay, Jess. Really. She stood there for a few more seconds, waiting for something to change. Then finally, she turned and walked out, her steps soft and uneven. The garage felt even quieter after that. But somehow, it also felt clean, like the last piece had fallen into place, and now there was nothing left to explain. 2 weeks later, I filed the divorce papers. No fireworks. No arguments. Just a quiet appointment in a sterile office with beige walls and a clerk who didn't ask questions. I signed my name where they told me to, slid the documents across the desk, and walked out into a gray afternoon that somehow felt brighter than the one before it. I didn't tell Jessica I was filing until it was already done. I left the envelope on the kitchen table with a note that simply said, "You can have whatever you want from the house. Just let me keep the garage." When I came home that night, she was gone. The closet was half empty. Her jewelry box was missing. The framed photo of us at Lake Michigan, one we'd taken years ago when we still laughed for real, was off the wall. She didn't leave a note, didn't call, and I didn't go looking for her. I sold the house a month later. We barely spoke through the process. Everything went through email or the lawyer. No tears, no bargaining, just business. When the papers came back finalized, I didn't even flinch. I just stared at the line that said dissolution of marriage granted and felt a weight lift off my chest like I hadn't realized how long I'd been carrying it. I moved into a small rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, a single-car garage, a small backyard, walls that needed painting, but it was mine. I hung an old Route 66 sign over the new workbench and lined the shelves with parts for the bike. Every day after work, I came home, cracked a beer, and went out to the garage. Ben started stopping by more often, sometimes with his cousin Tara, who ran the auto shop's front office. She had a laugh that filled a room and didn't ask questions when I didn't want to talk. I didn't tell many people about the divorce. Just said things didn't work out. Most people nodded and left it at that. The guys from the shop invited me to more meetups. I went. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again, whatever that meant. I wasn't rushing to rebuild anything. I was just living. No pretending. No waiting for someone to love me back. Just turning wrenches and losing track of time and realizing that peace doesn't always come with a grand finale. Sometimes it just shows up in the quiet, after the paperwork's signed, after the house is empty, after you stop trying to fix something that was already broken. And that's when you realize freedom doesn't always feel like celebration. Sometimes it feels like silence. And that's enough. It was a warm Friday night when we all went to the drive-in. Ben had been bugging me about it all week. "Come on, man," he said. "You've been grinding too hard. You need a night out that doesn't involve an oil filter." So I went. Tara was there too. Sitting on a lawn chair, she pulled from the trunk of her SUV. She brought snacks and a blanket, even though it was still 80 degrees after sunset. She sat close beside me, her leg brushing against mine now and then, not by accident. The movie was one of those cheesy action flicks with bad dialogue and louder explosions, but I didn't care. I wasn't really watching anyway. I was just there, with people who liked me, with no pressure, no weight. The sky was clear, stars blinking above the screen, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about Jessica. Until I heard her voice. Soft, unsteady. "Mark." I turned around. She was standing near the back of the lot, just outside the glow of the projector. Hair pulled back, face bare. She looked smaller than I remembered. She took a step forward, unsure. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. Tara looked over at me, but didn't move or say a word. Just waited. I stood up slowly and walked a few feet toward Jessica. Just enough so we weren't raising our voices across someone's tailgate. "I shouldn't be here," she said, eyes on the ground. "I know that, but I thought maybe we could just talk for a minute." "About what?" I asked. Calm, not cold, just tired. "I don't know. Us. Everything. She looked up then, her eyes glassy. "I guess I just didn't expect it to feel like this after." "After what?" I said. "After you left? After the divorce? After the affair?" She flinched, but didn't argue. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm not even hurt. I just don't feel anything when I look at you. That's the part that surprises me." She nodded slowly. "I get it." There was a long pause. The sounds of car engines, the distant rumble from the movie. Then she tried again. "Would you ever?" "No," I said gently. "I wouldn't." She opened her mouth, closed it, then took a small step back. "Okay." I nodded once, then turned around and walked back toward my chair. Tara didn't ask anything. She just passed me a handful of popcorn and leaned her shoulder lightly against mine. I looked at the screen, not really watching. And that was it. That was the last conversation Jessica and I ever had. No final fight. No dramatic goodbye. Just two people who'd run out of reasons to hold on. And as the movie played and the night settled around me, I realized closure didn't come with answers. It came with peace. And I had finally found it.